Hey, this is Brandon with Retro Archaeology, and today we're talking about the fourth James Bond film, Thunderball! I really enjoy that title. Just a fun word to say. I actually think of something called thunder snow. It's this weird phenomenon where it's thundering when it's snowing. Never experienced it, but it's something I used to be fascinated with. And Thunderball made me think of that. So I digress. Let's talk about the movie. I'm going to try and make these videos a little bit shorter. That last Goldfinger video, which is a movie I love, just ran a little long. So we're going to tighten things up and speed through this a little bit faster, but we're still going to read the back of the box. James Bond, Thunderball, CBS Fox drawer box. Let's find out what it's all about. Bond at his best. This fourth adventure in the Ian Fleming thrillers takes superhero James Bond to the Caribbean to battle evil forces above and below the water. Sean Connery reprises his role as the dashing, indestructible 007, whose current mission is to thwart a diabolical Spectre plot that threatens to destroy the entire Western world. A NATO aircraft carrying 2 atomic bombs has been hijacked, and the vile criminals are demanding an enormous ransom. Failure to comply with Spectre's demand will result in death and destruction, and Bond must foil the plot before it's too late. Captivating underwater action and amazing ultra-modern devices highlight this rousing Bond escapade. 129 minutes. Let's get into it right now. So, when Thunderball started, I had very high expectations. Goldfinger is one of my favorite Bond films, and I've got to be honest, my expectations were kind of popped for the first 30 minutes of this movie. This movie does not get going until they get to Nassau, the Bahamas, the Caribbean. The first half is just really odd and kind of all over the place. There's some fun stuff, like an action scene, but it's an undercover Spectre agent. And then we get into some really weird stuff. I'm talking weirdest of weird Bond, which is his attempted murder on the back stretching machine. Really awkward scene. He looks like he's air humping something. It's really awkward. He's in this awkward position. And the first 3 movies have all these sinister things that almost kill Bond. Think about the spider. Think about Robert Shaw's character. There's a bunch of moments he's put into. This has a back stretcher that almost kills Bond before the machine is shut off. Really awkward scene. Shortly after that, they cut to Bond, and he's got this bear glove on, giving a girl a massage or a weird back rub. It's just really awkward. Doesn't play. So I'm watching the beginning of this movie, and it's in this compound. He hasn't gotten dispatched yet. I know this has always been kind of referred to as the water Bond movie, and I was waiting for the water. I was waiting for the Caribbean. Finally, when we get to the Caribbean and the plot starts to roll out, I've got to say, Thunderball really pulled me in. This movie rips. Let's face it, Thunderball sets out to be memorable because of its underwater scenes and its underwater stunts. And damn it, it's a freaking success. The underwater director, cinematographer, was a man, Rico Browning. You might know him, you might not. If you don't, he played the original creature from the Black Lagoon in the Gillman suit. Awesome swimmer, obviously, to be able to pull that off. And he brings his swimming talents to the world of James Bond in Thunderball, and we all get to enjoy it. The underwater sequences in this movie are absolutely incredible. As I'm recording this, I want to say Happy Shark Week. What a perfect movie to watch for Shark Week. There are a bunch of sharks and underwater creatures that we see, and just an enormous fight scene at the end of this movie between Spectre and the good guys, the paratroopers. I could not believe how much they fit into this underwater sequence. How many people, there's, Bond's taking multiple guys out. There's some gore in this movie. There are spears and knives and blood and people's air masks being cut. They really go for it for this end action scene. My understanding is that Thunderball was more of an expensive movie to make than the previous 3 Bond films, and you can understand why. Lots of danger involved with underwater filming, lots of equipment, and lots of skilled actors to be able to pull that off. And Thunderball absolutely crushes it. Like, I was so into the underwater sequences of this film. And one of the things that I think made not only the cinematography great, but just the movie a huge strength as an underwater Bond film was the score. I thought the score for Thunderball might be my favorite. I actually have added it to my vinyl record soundtrack hunt list. The score is just very, like, it's classic James Bond, but it's very, like, ethereal. Like, the music for me evokes when you're underwater and you look up and you see rays of sun, and it's kind of got that, like, wavy light rays feature, to your eyes. The score, like, made me think of that. It made me think of when I'm underwater, or even when I've been to the ocean and, I've gone scuba diving before and snorkeling, that feeling of just the light and movement and swaying of water. This soundtrack was very, like, swaying to me, almost like moving, shifting water. It was very cool. I really, really liked the score to Thunderball. So awesome feature for me right off the bat, and a highlight of this movie, along with all the underwater sequences. I do like how we've now established Bond always has gadgets. Took a little bit to get going in the first couple movies of this series, but Q gives him some really good stuff. The underwater breather, a bunch of other tools as well. And I love that Q shows up and he's in, like, tropical attire.
Here we have a Geiger counter. Useful and unobtrusive. The sweep hand takes the radioactivity count. It's waterproof, of course.
But of course.
Now here's something I want you to use with special care. With special care.
Everything you give me.
Treat it with equal contempt. Yes, I know, but that's an underwater camera. It takes 8 pictures in rapid succession by pressing that button there.
Is that clever?
But if you can take pictures in the dark with an infrared film, yes.
Must have been great for him to get dispatched to the Bahamas, because he looks like he's ready to just hang out on the beach after he meets up with Bond. Really fun to see Q's outfit in this, and Bond gets some really fun gadgets from him. The movie Goldfinger before this deviates from the Spectre organization, the Spectre storyline that we had in the first 2 films. We come back to Spectre here, and our villain Emilio Largo has an eye patch, because he can't just look like a normal dude. Eye patch makes somebody look like a bad guy.
What do you mean?
I thought perhaps you'd another visitor.
No.
That gun. Looks more fitting for a woman.
Do you know much about guns, Mr. Bond?
No. I know a little about women.
He's got an eye patch. He doesn't look very good in a scuba suit. And he's okay. Like, he's not going to be one of my favorite Bond villains. I think Goldfinger is way more fun as a villain. Emilio Largo, he's a good presence. Like, he drives the plot forward, and you definitely get a sense he's a leader in this. He's like a Spectre general, you could say. But I don't know, something about him just doesn't land as well as prior villains, or even villains to come in the Bond series. So Largo, like, he's fine. He's not going to be one of my favorites. I think a lot of people probably don't remember him, and I think that's why Thunderball, among some Bond fans I hear, is not as highly received for a Sean Connery film. But I got to be honest, like, from an action perspective, I loved this. I loved how unique it is with the underwater sequences, and I think the plot's really good as well. Stealing 2 atomic bombs. Talk about a threat. Talk about Spectre going big. And, there's a lot of things that just set up Bond uncovering this Spectre mission, and the stakes are raised in this, so to speak. We get 2 really strong Bond girls in this with Domino and Fiona Volpe. I looked up, and her last name is Italian for the word fox, so her character is kind of named Fiona Fox, which is really fun once you kind of know that little piece of trivia. I thought Fiona was a really awesome character who just stays evil throughout, which really contradicts events in prior Bond films up to this point. She has a great line later in the film, after her and Bond have had some evenings together, she stays evil in this movie as a member of the Spectre organization, and she has a great line when she kind of comes at Bond and is like, oh, you think you can just sleep with a woman and she becomes good? She forgets everything that she's doing? Something like that. And she kind of just throws that at Bond, which is really funny because it contradicts what happened in the prior movie with Pussy Galore, who Bond kind of switches over to help their cause. So Fiona stays bad in this, and when Bond dispatches her, which someone's going to shoot Bond, but he spins around after dancing with Fiona and she takes the shot. He brings her to a table and, says something like, do you mind if she sits? She's just dead. It's so great after this character who's been in the movie a lot, reaches her demise. The way Bond just handles that and throws her down is really funny to me. So I think Thunderball is ultimately a really successful Bond film, and one that I really enjoyed because the action scenes and the setting of the Bahamas is a huge success. But I gotta say, there were some really dumb things that happened in Thunderball, which I do think is gonna be a theme as we get closer to the 70s. We're in the mid-60s with this film. But there's just some really dumb things, like the Spectre ring, that Bond, sees and calls out, and, she's like, how did you know I was with Spectre? And there's multiple Spectre rings that are, like, so obvious, the Spectre logo, like, come on, you don't want to be a little bit more secretive? So that's kind of dumb. At the end, the very end of the movie, there's this random dude who, kind of frees Domino. And Domino comes up with this guy, and Bond is like, who's he? And she's like, I don't know. And they, deploy, to their rescue. And there's no other mention of the guy. Like, he's just left. The movie ends, and, like, this guy was in this one scene. It's really random. Like, honestly, somebody should do a wiki or a deep dive into who that character is. It's probably out there. But they really just, like, have this character free Domino, and then instantly brush him to the side, and it's just really awkward. So there's just some odd things in the script that don't play as well. It does feel a little rushed, but I don't really care. This movie is a ton of fun. Bond has some really good one-liners. The setting just carries the movie for me. I do want to go back to one other cheesy thing to me. The opening scene with the jetpack. I'm watching it and I'm like, oh my god, look at him. Look how stiff he is flying. Later, I looked up some details. That was actually a real jetpack. So that was there was a real pilot. They cut in Bond in like a green screen and for one shot. But there's a real pilot. That was a working jetpack. Blew my mind when I read that. I had to look it up like 3 different times. Didn't look very real in the movie, but my understanding is it was a jetpack created by the military, and it could only fly like 21 to 22 seconds, so it wasn't a huge success. Also had very low fuel, and they used it in this movie Thunderball. So even though it might look a little cheesy, it did to me. Maybe it's the close-up of Bond where you see like the foil straps. I don't know. Apparently that was a real jetpack. Fascinating. Very bizarre. Some other quick things I'll just mention before we wrap this up. As I've watched these Bond movies in sequential order, there's some things I've picked up on. There's some things that they continue on with the character. And I think, one thing that really carries from Goldfinger to Thunderball is these scenes where Bond gets to like have an interaction or a friendly game of sport with the main baddie. In Thunderball, it's the card game. And there's several other interactions between Bond and Largo where they're just talking. I think that's what makes these early Bond films a lot of fun. I think in most action movies, our hero and our villain don't necessarily like interact all that much unless they're trying to kill each other. In these early Bond films, there's some really good conversation, really good character development, really good situations where the villain is trying to just like jockey their superiority over Bond, and Bond vice versa, and that continues in Thunderball. Some other things that I'm picking up on is Dom Perignon is mentioned a lot in Bond movies, so maybe comment if that's something that's from the Ian Fleming novels. I've never read them, but it is in Dr. No. It was in the last movie. In this movie, there's a scene where Bond orders the 55 of Dom. And it comes up a lot. I think Bond is so well known for vodka martini, shaken not stirred. But Bond also likes Dom Perignon. And it has been in 3 of the 4 movies. So I'm going to keep listening for that if that comes up again. I don't know if we associate that drink with Bond as much as we should. I think in a prior movie, he mentions he likes the 53, but in Thunderball, he orders the 55. So we'll see. He's got different tastes on his liquors. So that's just something that stuck out to me that I wanted to share. Other than that, I think we're going to wrap this up pretty quickly. To me, Thunderball is not as enjoyable a film as Goldfinger in terms of pacing. I think Thunderball suffers a little bit from a bad first half hour, but I gotta tell you, the rest of the movie from the second half on, and the underwater fight scene between Spectre and the good guys, I guess I'll call them, was really cool to me. So many things are fun in this movie. The setting is a big win for it. I will happily watch Thunderball again. I would love to see an HDR 4K remaster of Thunderball. I'll take that jump from VHS to 4K. I think this movie would be gorgeous with all the underwater shots with a real proper camera negative remaster. So thank you for watching. Let me know your thoughts on Thunderball. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe, and stay tuned as I continue to work through the entire Bond films in order. This July, I don't think I'm going to finish. We might take this into August, but for month 7, it's 007 month for me on VHS. Thanks for watching.